All right, sir, come on up. You're going to stand right up here in front of my clerk. She'll swear you in.
Hello. Can you please state and spell your first and last name?
Sure, it's David Frerer, F-R-E-R.
Thank you. You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God? Around the court reporter up the ring.
Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, my name is David Frerer. I'm a detective with the Gilbert Police Department, and I have been with the police department for about over 20 years now. Right now, I'm assigned to the Violent Crimes Unit, which investigates anything with violence, homicides, armed robberies, and that type of thing.
Can you tell us the different areas you have worked while working for the Gilbert Police Department?
Absolutely. I started with patrol. I did that, and then I went to become a school resource officer in high school, which was a great gig. And then I was assigned by the chief as an internal affairs detective. I did that for 2 years, and then I tested and I made it to the Violent Crimes Unit.
How long have you been in the Violent Crimes Unit?
Since about 2019.
On October 2nd of 2019, were you in the Violent Crimes Unit?
I was.
How long had you been there at that time?
I would say since July of that year.
Were you part of the detectives who were called out to 3875 East Phelps Street in Gilbert?
I was.
When you arrived, can you describe for us what you saw, what the scene looked like?
Sure, detectives get called out a little bit later, so the scene is usually secure. When I pulled up, I recognized that there was yellow police tape around the scene, or at least a portion of it. There was police officers with their marked vehicles in the area.
When you got to the scene, were you briefed or given any information about what it was you were there for?
Yes, we usually receive a briefing from either the case officer that's there on scene or a detective that is right there before I did.
Okay. And what did you understand you guys were investigating there?
What I was told was a gentleman was coming home to his house. When he was getting ready to pull into his driveway, he was shot at. He quickly left the area and called 911.
What was your role at this scene?
I usually just, this time I filled the gaps where it needed to be. So I took photographs. I collected any evidence that was there at the scene, coordinated with the case detective, Detective Pillar.
Did you work with Detective McDermott?
I did.
And did you ever work with Detective Biggs?
Yes, I did.
While you were there, did you see the Tesla?
I did. By the time I got to the residence, the Tesla was parked in the driveway and the doors were open.
When you, let me ask you this. In your time as a police officer, have you seen bullet holes in vehicles before?
Yes.
And can you tell us, as a either detective or patrol officer, did you ever have any training on, let's start first with processing crime scenes?
Yes, I attended the crime scene and advanced crime scene.
And what is the crime scene and advanced crime scene?
Crime scene can mean many, many things, from photographs to collecting latent prints, trajectory, blood spatter.
Okay. So when you saw this Tesla in the driveway, did you observe or look at a defect in the car?
Yes.
I'm going to put up, starting with Exhibit 26. Where did you notice this defect?
That was the driver's side, right above the door or the window.
And when you observed this, I'm going to put up Exhibit 30. What did you believe this to be?
That is consistent with a bullet hole or a projectile that would go through metal.
Why did you determine that this was from a bullet?
Well, we look at the totality of the circumstances, what's being told to us, what's being reported. According to the victim here, he said that he was shot at because he saw a weapon. And so that's what we were taking it as, is a bullet hole. It does have the consistency of a bullet hole. You can see the clean that goes into the metal.
When you say clean that goes into the metal, what do you mean by that?
Well, a bullet is very hot when it comes through, projectile. And when it comes through, it can go through metal pretty easily. Depends on the round or the type of, it's either handgun or rifle. This is a larger hole. With the melting around, you can see around the sides. So I would assume with the victim saying he was shot at, that's where the bullet hole would have been.
When you are looking at a scene, are you also looking to the physical evidence to tell you whether or not this is in fact a bullet hole?
Yes, we look at the bullet hole or the hole, see if there's any evidence, maybe pieces of projectile, any type of, could be a casing on the ground or any of that type of stuff. That's what we're looking for as far as a bullet hole or damage to a vehicle.
So in this case, the shape of this hole and the clean that you described told you that this was from a projectile striking and going into this vehicle?
After we found the projectile, pieces of projectile also.
So in addition to the shape and clean of the hole, you also looked to the physical evidence of the actual projectile fragments?
That is correct.
Were you present when those were found?
Yes, I was.
And we see here in Exhibit 40, is this sort of some molding that was along the frame of that Tesla?
Yes.
Just, I guess, a little to the rear of the bullet hole itself?
Yes.
And in that molding were projectile fragments recovered?
Yes, and that is one right there.
When you looked at these fragments, what told you they were projectile fragments?
Well, the consistency of what a metal, I'm not a metallurgy by any means, but this would be consistent to what a projectile looks like after it has been struck, something of hard metal. There's also, there could be some jacketing left on the projectile also. Could be markings, so we're looking for all of that.
Do you look sometimes to see, for instance, if there's anything like a copper on the fragments?
Yes.
In this case, do you recall if there was copper on the fragments?
Yes, I believe there was.
In your training and experience, having worked as an officer for over 20 years and having seen other projectile fragments, was what you and the other detectives found in that molding consistent with all the other projectile fragments you'd ever found?
Yes, they all are similar in shape and size and color.
And in your training and experience, when a bullet hits something hard like a metal, have you on other occasions seen projectiles fragment like that?
Yes. And that depends a lot on the bullet itself.
So depending on the bullet and what it hits changes if it fragments or not.
That is correct.
In this case, though, knowing this went through metal, were you surprised to see it fragmented?
No.
In this investigation, did you help canvass the scene to try to find any residents who might have cameras that might be around to show anything?
Yes, and that's a normal practice.
In doing that, did you find anyone who had any cameras that showed anything?
There were people with cameras, but they didn't catch. Sometimes the cameras don't go all the way to the roadway. It's just to their walkway for their own purposes.
Okay. Did you help in any way with searching the roadway to try to recover any other pieces of those fragments?
Yes, but searching for fragments on a roadway is very difficult. We even brought out a metal detector to try, but we're talking about a vast area because the victim actually drove away from the scene. So some of the projectile could have been left in the vehicle until he left. He turns a corner, he speeds up, slows down, it could have fallen out. So it was very difficult to find anything else on a roadway that large or a scene that large.
And you're talking about what could be small little pieces.
Very small.
So although you guys attempted to follow the path that Brandon had expressed he'd driven,
Yes, we did
you locate anything?
No.
As a detective in the Violent Crimes Unit, do you often help other detectives with sort of follow-up work?
Yes.
So if they need a little help executing a search warrant or doing something like that, you might get tasked with that?
Absolutely.
So in addition to helping to work this scene and helping to process the Tesla, were you asked later on in December 23rd of 2019 to help execute a search warrant on a Ford F-150 that was owned by Alex Cox?
Yes, I was.
Where was that search warrant executed? Where did you, I guess, process and search through the vehicle?
The Gilbert Police Department has a property building, and it's a very large parking lot for vehicles. And there are 2 fully covered bays that we actually can bring our vehicles into to keep us kind of out of the weather. It's very hot in Arizona, obviously, so it's very hard to search out in the middle of a parking lot. So these bays are air conditioned, and we were able to close the doors, and that's what we did at 2750 East Williamsfield Road, and that's in Gilbert.
So were you tasked on December 23rd of 2019 to help execute a search warrant on a Ford F-150 that was owned by Alex Cox?
Yes, I was.
Were photographs taken during that search warrant?
Yes.
Showing the defendant exhibits 112 through 118, if I can have my paralegal approach. If you can take a look at those and let me know if you recognize those photographs.
Yes, I do.
And are those photographs that were taken during that search warrant on December 23rd?
Yes, what usually happens is we'll have a crime scene technician who will, when we start the warrant, they will take overall photographs before we even search the vehicle, before we even touch the vehicle. So that was where a lot of those photographs came from. Once that is completed, and sometimes they search for DNA, they swab the insides of the vehicle. Then once that is all finished, then I will actually go in to the vehicle to search it.
State will move to admit exhibits 112 through 118.
No objection.
112 through 118 are admitted.
So in 112, do we just see, I guess, photographs are taken of the exterior of the vehicle, like you said?
Yes.
So 113 and then 114, does that show the rear and the license plate of this truck?
Yes.
So it was a personalized plate, CPQUINT?
Yes, and when you first showed me those pictures, I've searched a lot of vehicles. So the first couple pictures show the truck, but once I see the license plate, I remember that license plate specifically because it is personalized.
Okay. So in this Jeep, did you look inside to see if you could find a registration?
It was the F-150 I searched.
Uh-huh.
And yes, I found the registration, and it was all those items that were photographed were found in the middle console in between the driver and passenger seat.
So in Exhibit 116, we see that this vehicle is registered to Alexander Lamar Cox.
That is correct, and that is that truck. We do match it with the VIN.
Okay. And this was from 4/8 of 2019.
Well, that's when
That was printed at least.
yeah.
Did you find inside a letter from Chad Daybell to Alexander Cox?
Yes, I did.
Did you find inside this vehicle any evidence of gun ownership?
Yes. And in the picture, you can see
And I'm going to put up 117. Is that a closer up of one of the items?
much better.
What is that?
That is a practice bullet. When you're loading your gun, it will help you dry fire. Because when the chamber of a weapon is empty, it usually will not fire unless it has something in there. So that's what we use for this type of thing. It's a 223 round, so that means it's going to be a rifle. And this is just a practice round, so you'll be able to cock the gun however it is, and it will load so you can pull the trigger. And that's usually for help aiming the rifle.
And then did you also find some earplugs in there?
Yes, and that's common for when you go to the range or even at the Gilbert Police Department when we shoot our qualifications. We are issued some earplugs just like that, the orange.
And did you impound all those items?
I did.
The state has no further questions for this witness.
All right, Ross?
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead and start.
Detective Farrar, when did you arrive on the scene that day? Do you remember?
I do not.
Who was there when you arrived?
I believe Detective Pillar, Detective McDermott. I arrived with Detective Biggs.
Okay. Did you see Officer Robb there when you arrived?
I believe she was there.
And what did you do when you first got there?
This was several years ago, but it would be normal for me to get a quick briefing to see what happens and what needs to be done.
Okay. And who briefed you?
I can't recall, but it's usually either a patrol officer or it could be a case detective.
Which was Detective Pillar?
Yes,
Okay. And is it Pillar or Pilar?
Pillar.
Okay. And you don't remember if it was Detective Pillar who was the one who briefed you?
I'm sorry, I do not.
Okay. But you were briefed to what did the briefing consist of?
What basically crime we had, what had occurred at the scene, and if there was any evidence on scene to start with.
And did you observe other people at the scene as well?
Yes, there were several officers, and I do remember the victim was with a few other friends, I believe, but they were outside the crime scene.
And where was the victim and his friends located when you saw them?
They were outside the crime scene.
Can you tell us where that was in the neighborhood?
Well, it was visible from the actual house, so crime scene was across the road, I'd say maybe 50 yards away from us.
Okay. Just sitting or standing or hanging out?
I think they were just staying there until Detective Pillar was going to go question them.
You had mentioned that Brandon told his story, and then someone briefed you about it. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then you took photos? Is that
I
correct?
took, yes, some photos, yes.
How many photos do you think you took?
I don't recall.
A lot?
I don't have an answer for that. I'm sorry.
More than 20?
Yes,
Okay. Less than 100?
probably.
Okay.
I am not sure.
And then you said you collected evidence. What evidence did you collect?
I stood by and I received the projectiles that were removed from the Tesla.
And they went into an evidence bag?
Yes.
And then they were delivered where?
We take them to the Gilbert Police Department. We have a property room there. We can itemize it and seal it and store it in a locked container.
And someone's in charge of that? It's logged in, I guess?
Yes, every piece of property that is taken in has its own unique identifying number. It's unique for the Gilbert Police Department as Mesa or the other people would have their own unique numbers also.
Okay. So it would basically consist of like the log having its number, the name, the date, or something consistent with that?
Yes, consistent with that, yes.
Okay. And did they remain there until now when they're here? Or,
They would stay in storage until a detective or somebody checks it out.
okay. And that would probably be the case agent would check them out to bring them to court?
Yes, that's
Okay.
the normal procedure.
And then, do you know if any of those projectiles were tested?
Tested?
Yeah. To be consistent with a handgun or a rifle?
I don't believe so.
Okay. And who would do that testing if they were tested? Who would
We-
send that out?
We would send that out.
So you could do it?
No, we would send it out to a scientist or a forensic scientist of some sort.
Okay. But I'm saying you could be one to say, hey, we should test this.
Yes, I believe so, yes. If we believe there's evidence in it,
Or the case agent could send it out.
yes,
Anyone could request it, is what you're saying.
true.
And did anyone request that?
I am not aware of that.
And did you specifically request that?
I did not.
Okay. You mentioned something about it being large, the bullet hole. How large was it? I had a picture.
Well, you could see in the pictures, I would say approximately, it's been a while, but I'd say approximately maybe 2 inches by 2.5, something in that frame.
Okay. I saw that there was a measuring tape on there that had about 2 inches on it, but it was
Okay.
much smaller than that.
Okay.
Would you say it was more than the size of a dime?
Well, we'd have to look at the photographs if you have them with the, I can
Okay.
give you a better understanding of the size.
You had mentioned that you had searched for casings on the ground. Is that correct?
We look for casings or projectiles, yes.
Did you find any casings anywhere?
No.
Would that be common?
To not find?
Correct.
It all depends.
Where would a casing go, is my question.
There is no scientific way we know which will come out of a gun. We know either right or left, but as far as it leaving the gun, it could bounce, hit anything. There's just a million other things it could do to end up anywhere.
Okay. And you mentioned that you had brought in a metal detector. Would that detect a casing?
It would pick up a casing sound, yeah.
And what was the area where the metal detector was used to try to find some kind of metal or casing? How large, would you say?
Well, we tried the window itself that had shattered out around the vehicle, where the vehicle first came in. We walked the roadway.
In the street?
In the street, yes.
Maybe all of the blocked off area from the police tape?
Yes, and I believe that some detectives might have went to the park, walked up to the round of the park where we believe that's what the victim told us he went to call 911.
Okay. And then, did anyone go past those markings, like where perhaps Mr. Boudreaux had said that he saw the Jeep following him? Like that another shot may have been executed?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
In looking for casings on the ground or in that area, was that search expanded beyond where the police tape was?
Yes.
So would it go all the way to where Mr. Boudreaux would have said that the Jeep passed him? Looking for further casings, I mean.
Yes.
Okay. But none were found?
None.
Unless you just have a couple more, we should probably break and get the jury to the jury bus.
Okay, Your Honor.
Do you have a couple more, or should we break?
I have more than that.
Okay, let's recess for the evening.